Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Irene Angelos, and I am the Vice President for Client Development at Amidst Solutions. We are an adaptive event and association management company that has been strategically serving our clients for over 40 years. While many of you know us as a company that uses our collective buying power to leverage great hotel contract terms for your meetings, we also do so many other things, like full service association management, consulting for virtual and live events, exhibition management, marketing, housing, registration, and more. When the COVID pandemic hit, we launched a forum for our IMN colleagues and clients to share strategies, perspectives, and ways to navigate this crisis before us. This need gave birth to this webinar series entitled Keep Calm and Plan On, an event management amidst a global pandemic. Today's session will focus on a marketing perspective. Let me introduce our panelists for you today. We have Angelique Wilkins, Vice President of Communications and Meetings for the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, otherwise known as CADCA. Amy Gable, she's Chief Experience Officer at the Solar Energy Trade Shows, otherwise known as SETS. Tim Morris, Deputy Director for Marketing for SETS's solar power events. Eric Hansen is CEO of Mechanic, a business and branding and creative marketing agency, and our preferred IMM partner in the marketing space. Finally, we've got Michael Barnett, CEO of Ingo, an event growth software company that helps to build communities for meetings and events that a lot of you experience today as a result of being registered for this webinar. No, we'll be monitoring the chat box along the way, and we'll do our best to answer questions as they pop up. Okay, let's get started. Angelique, you have several meetings a year, including your largest, which is typically a live event held in July. Will you describe that event and what you decided to do with it this year?
Absolutely, and welcome everybody from Brady Bunch land. I want to thank you, Irene, and I also just want to thank IMN for being just an amazing industry partner and for convening this really very important webinar series. It's so timely, so vital, and it's just so helpful to all of us. So a little bit about CACA and our membership, because obviously our membership played a huge factor in our decision-making process. We're about 30 years old, and we have a rather homogeneous member base. All of our members are focused around one central mission, which is preventing drug use and abuse in their communities, specifically youth. Our members are essentially grassroots organizations, coalitions, and a lot of them are in rural locations. They lean towards being a little bit more low tech, and that's just because the nature of their work is predicated on their ability to be in their communities directly, connecting and engaging with individuals. So again, tech is kind of a low priority. And honestly, they've been a little bit spoiled by CADCA. They are very accustomed to CADCA providing high touch customer service levels. For example, we manually process by hand 50% of our event registrations. So that's sort of our member base. We do host two major training events annually, one in the winter and one in the summer. And so our summer training event is about 2,200 people, but 20% of those are youth aged 12 to 17. It is 4 days of intense hands-on training. It's all day long. It includes some networking opportunities, and it's supported by all of our major federal and corporate partners. So early on in the pandemic, we realized that the summer event, which is slated for late July, would be impacted. We took a look at the fact that there are three primary reasons why our members come to our events. One is the program content, hands down, it's very strong, it's very timely, it's very relevant. The second is their ability to network, and the third is that we bring thought leaders together. So when we looked at the delivery options, in person, hybrid, or virtual, we knew we had to evaluate how each of those options would be impacted, or how they would impact our attendance drivers. And after weighing a ton of variables, which we're going to talk about later, we ultimately ended up deciding to go 100% virtual about a month ago, which was approximately 8 weeks out from our event.
Okay, thanks, Angelique. Amy and Tim, will you share with our audience how you changed your plans for your signature Solar Power International program?
Absolutely, and thank you again for hosting us. SPI is our annual renewable energy show. It has about 600,000 square feet, 20,000 qualified attendees, over 300 educational opportunities, and a lot of highly produced special events. So when the pandemic hit, the question was really, how do we provide an opportunity for our people to continue to do business? And to be honest, for a while we stumbled, just a lot, maybe like a lot of you. We kept waiting for things to get back to normal and waiting and waiting. We knew regardless of what happened, we needed to stay in touch with our stakeholders. So we leveraged a back burner outreach plan to house various ideas, voices, and campaigns. And that was our step one. Step two was messaging cancellation or postponement around our other smaller regional and international shows. We host 15 different shows throughout the year throughout the world. And that communication really needed to focus on being earnest and provide clear steps about what's happening next. In addition, with so many partners, we wanted to ensure we were speaking with a single voice through all of our different channels. Which brings us to step three and back to our big show. That event had always hosted a diversity of industries and technologies. And so we were used to servicing a lot of different needs. We leveraged that experience to create a number of different strategies, all under the same umbrella branding. And Tim will talk about why we chose to keep that umbrella branding and not create a bunch of single-use brands or logos. So strategy number one was to still host a live outdoor exposition. It's impossible to negate all the risks of coronavirus, but there was growing consensus that if you're going to leave your home, it's safer to be outdoors. So we're moving our expo to a different city to accommodate strict stay-at-home orders in one jurisdiction and to a different date to give ourselves a little more planning. The new city is still within driving distance of our largest audience base, which was a key decision factor. And the audience we're targeting for the live event, which is primarily our original audience, those individuals and companies who want to continue to do business. Strategy number two is taking all of our education virtual. So representing about 30% of our attendee base, our education program typically attracts executives and skilled laborers. So based on feedback, we believe this audience probably wouldn't get on a plane and travel, but would absolutely be in a position to pay for content, and was the best way to meet this audience's need was to move that conversation completely online. We're stressing breakout rooms and direct conversations with industry thought leaders for this to help us differentiate that paid experience. Our third new strategy was hybrid content. And that is really meant to be the bridge between the live and the virtual. It gives us an opportunity to really showcase and highlight our sponsors' content. And this audience we're expecting to be our largest, and give those people the ability to connect with vendors, technology providers, and it's also our only complementary strategy. And then finally, later this year, we'll launch a subscription service, and it will enable us to repurpose a lot of the content that we've been creating right now with webinars, as well as future content, sponsorship outreach, and partner messages. So that's an overview of the different strategies we broke our big show down to.
Yeah, and from a marketing perspective, this brought a lot of interesting pivots. Ultimately with our main North America Smart Energy Week, a lot of the big selling points for that are the fact that it's a very large show with lots of networking, hundreds of sessions, hundreds of speakers. And obviously, given the current health crisis, like those, even if it turns out we are the biggest in all those categories at the end of the year, it's not really a message in 2020. You can't really go around promoting that you're the biggest of anything, because that will just come back, back to bite you. So really trying to refocus those big points primarily on, we're giving the audience options to engage with us, whether it is in person, whether it is a hybrid of both, or whether it is 100% virtual. They have options to engage with us, not just in the format, but also in the time that they engage with us. With the virtual education conferences that we're having, that's a 6-week series beginning in September. So people can engage with us that way, or on site in Las Vegas in October as well. So there are options with the format and the time frame which people can engage with us. In addition, it's given us an opportunity to really kind of look at how our audience has been segmented. Some of that still applies even in the current situation, just given the way our brand sort of formats and the different verticals we have within there. But there's also new opportunities there and new ways we have to look at things. For example, I mean, internationally, obviously that's going to be a huge change in strategy because most of the international audience is not going to be able to come to our events. We have to look at that segment differently and provide them with a different message, you know, highlighting the virtual options that we have and how those options can be used for them to connect. If they're a company looking to connect with US people on site, how they can do that, or vice versa. So really making those connections virtually is a specific message for that target. And then you know, in addition to like really trying to find those, identifying those key stakeholders that we've had in each one of our different, I should say, subsegments, since we do have a lot of content across the renewable energy space, finding those key stakeholders in each one of those can help us really promote this message of our new events in the new format. And getting that done ahead of time and really helps transition the process a little bit better. And then lastly, in terms of marketing, I mean, really, because we have these 3 different new formats, really explaining how this works to our audience is, you know, critical. I mean, we can tell them we're doing all these different things, but no one's going to be interested in it if they don't really understand how it works. So really trying to walk them through the process of what the registration options are, how the virtual format's going to actually work, how they can actually interact with each other. Really making those basic steps to explain how this is all going to work is important to how we pivot our marketing strategy.
Excellent. Thank you all. Clearly, both organizations are really blazing new trails, exciting stuff, lots of new experiences for your members ahead, and interesting to see how it will go. You're both really in the thick of it right now with Angelique. You've got a July date to go, and Amy and Tim, your event, it's in October, but clearly you have essentially kind of blown it up and changed it all. So a lot of planning to do in such a short time, given all the changes and adjustments. I wanted to tap into the expertise of our IMM partners next. Eric, amidst all of this reinvention that SETS and Katka just talked about, can you share some critical considerations that organizations should have top of mind when they're redesigning things and trying to compose a strategy to launch?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for inviting me to participate today. My business partner, Alex, is really risk adverse, the complete opposite of me. And so really early on, actually in mid-February, he started to really kind of push myself and the team as he was starting to hear news of what was kind of slowly starting to happen, to start thinking about the future of how we serve our clients. And meetings are a big part of that, and trade shows and conferences for associations and nonprofits. The short answer is we've narrowed it down to really kind of 5 major areas that we encouraged our clients and others to really start to think about as they pivot. And as Angelique and Amy and Tim, I mean, some of our clients and many of you don't have time to sit down and really think things through. You know, it's going to be messy, but the areas that we wanted to focus on were experience. So as you pivot to either a full virtual or hybrid model, how is the experience changing? Which then implies how is the content changing? The third, which I'm going to let some other folks talk about shortly, is the audiences, right? Tim just hit on this, but the audience is really critical. Your story. So what are you going to go out to the world and tell them, right? What is the value proposition? And then the last thing is revenue, right? Sponsorship, exhibition dollars, registration, all of those things. So we really kind of started to focus on those 5 questions. Some of the questions that come up after that or during that conversation that I think are important also is this a long-term or a short-term pivot? I think many of our clients and probably many of you started to think of this as a kind of short-term pivot. And I think in reality, especially when you're looking at like the hybrid models, or if you're introducing this as an entire new product portfolio, that it might be permanent. And so what does that mean? And the last question before I kick it over and around audiences to Michael is, do you have the right people in place and the right partners in place to be successful in this future state? One of the big challenges we saw with a few of our clients as they were looking at changing their entire, 60, 70% of their revenue model was they had a staff or certain people on staff that may not be, although they've been great historically, they might not be the right people. And those are really some of the tough questions, right? Is this permanent? But experience, content, audience, story, and revenue were the key areas that we really started to focus in. And I know Michael has got some great insights on talking about the audiences in more depth.
Michael?
Thanks, Eric. Oh yeah, we've looked at a lot of audiences around the world, and we've now served a few 100,000 virtual event attendees. And I think that I feel like I'm a broken record on focusing on value. I love your point there, Eric, and the analysis that some of our other speakers, Angelique and Amy, were speaking to there. That it's all about the value, right? What you have to reconsider is, what is the value we bring to the table? No longer are you in a position where, or any of us in a position where, our people are coming because they out of habit. And so the audience is not a habitual audience. They're not attending because they've attended every year. Because things are so much different, what they value, what they're looking for has changed. And what they need is stability in the midst of crisis, new answers and new solutions in the midst of this. And so that does change the audience. It's not, how do I make small improvements? How do I make marginal improvements? It's, how do I make significant changes to my company to be relevant in the midst of this and into the future? I think that a lot of people are looking at this as, well, we're dealing with COVID right now. And there's really two groups here. There's those that think that the audience this is a blip, and so the audience will be temporarily changed. And then there's others who think that this is a lasting change that COVID has accelerated. And my bias is towards that group, that we had telemedicine coming, we had more people doing Zoom conferences, we had more engagement through video, through FaceTime, through Skype. All of that was happening, and we had e-gaming and esports, but now that's been accelerated 5, 10, 15 years because of COVID. And now we've got people habituated into exchanging content and conversations this way. And so that changes everything. Right now we've got to think about what does the world look like where we do want to still interacting in person. It's critical to interact in person, but there's also this new opportunity to interact virtually. And so the people that you're looking for in terms of attending and that audience are the ones that have a real need, that have a real problem. And the good news is pretty much everybody has problems right now. So every association, every organizer, every event has real purpose of bringing those people together, because it's not like any of us are sitting back going, well, things are great, I don't have to worry about anything right now. In past years, events might have been less relevant for a lot of people, because if you were in an industry that hadn't seen a lot of change, maybe you didn't need to go to the event. But this year, you need to engage the rest of your industry. You need to learn best practices. You need to learn who's creating solutions, who the problem solvers are, and be ready to accelerate your business, re-engage your business, restart your business. How do you keep things clean? How do you deal with liability issues? I think what's so exciting at this moment, in the midst of all of this difficulty, and it's hard, and I don't want to mitigate that, but there's so much opportunity to answer for our events, to bring people together to answer so many of these questions that we all have, that we're all struggled with. And I think IMN, thank you for involving me, has done a great job of doing that here, where Barb and Irene and Josephine saw the need out there, where so many of us are struggling with these hard questions. And that's because they focused on what we needed, everything else gets a lot easier, I think. I think it gets a lot easier to say, well, who can help answer these questions? at Amy and Tim and Angelique and help answer these questions. Let's get them. People will want to hear from them. And so that's the essence of building events and creating new events even.
Great. Just a quick reminder, if anyone in the audience has a question they want to pose to the panel, feel free to type that into the chat. We've got some folks monitoring that, and they'll feed us questions, and we'll try our best to work them in. Thank you, everyone, for those quick essential insights. I wanted to ask our clients, having just heard all of this, is there anything off of that checklist did you take those similar steps when you were devising your strategy for repurposing your meetings? Were there things that you didn't do? Just thought I'd throw that over to Amy and see what your thoughts are.
Absolutely. And yes, we absolutely followed a very similar pattern. Eric talked about the experience and really honing in on that experience. And you heard it in those 4 strategies. With each of those strategies, we were targeting different audiences and what those audiences would expect from us, and our ability to create a safe space for those people who wanted to meet in person, to curate content that with the executive level impact and interaction for those executives who have come to see our education as the top in the industry, and understand that there continues to be an audience for really moving forward and doing business and creating opportunities for people to do business in whatever way they feel comfortable. And so being able to provide them with a number of different options, understanding the revenue impacts of each of those strategies, understanding the experience and how we would continue to grow audiences in each of those, and then manage that change. Like Michael was talking about, understanding what the capabilities of our staff were, having hard conversations with our partners about what we were going to be able to do and what we weren't going to be able to do as we are all going through this crisis. I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who's going to drill a little further down into some of the marketing specifics.
Yeah, and so, one of the things, our role in the marketing department here was, when all these changes were happening, and as Amy mentioned that we're kind of waiting for things to get better. We initially didn't really know which way we were going to go, but I think to help streamline things from a marketing perspective, we knew the current situation was going to be, pretty much untenable, and so something had to, we needed to start preparing for a change of sorts. So, really being able to sort of prepare as much as possible in terms of crafting general messages that you can kind of tweak once those the new direction kind of becomes more clear. Start building your messaging that way. Still going through all your different marketing channels and identifying like where are all the places that we're going to have to start making changes over the next couple of weeks. Obviously the website is one of them. Just combing through every single page and making sure that page here, page there, like all this stuff's going to have to change. Making sure that stuff's flagged ahead of time. So when you do make that switch, the whole process is a lot more streamlined. And I think I touched on this before too, but really identifying those key partners who will help you down your new journey. Is pretty critical to do ahead of time. And so starting to have those conversations with them earlier in the process will make them more likely to help you out down the line.
Sounds good. Angelique, how about you?
So at the onset, of the pandemic, when we saw the writing on the wall, we crafted a list of factors that we knew we needed to consider for those 2 scenarios. And for us, it was really just 2, in-person or virtual. We eliminated hybrid as an option pretty much at onset, because literally for an organization of our size, it would have been twice as much work and money. So it was a non-starter. And a lot of those factors are what, Eric mentioned, and certainly Michael as well. We ultimately focused on what our event value propositions are, which is our program content, our networking, and the participation of those industry leaders, and figuring out how exactly we would cover each of those under the 2 different scenarios. And the great news for us is that after weighing everything, we were really confident we could deliver a strong event either way. And that is largely because we have a really excellent technology services partner who had already begun scaling up their operations in the virtual event space. And then, you know, as an organization, we were committed to presenting the event at the original scheduled time. For us, you know, pushing it off further was just not an option, and it had a lot to do with the youth that are present. We can't go into the school year. But then also, you know, we were committed to delivering it, which I know a lot of organizations just made the decision to cancel. That was not an option for us. So once we addressed those major factors, like our audience and our content and making sure we could do all of those things justice, we developed 2 separate budget and marketing plans. And on the budget side, I think I saw a question come up. You know, for in-person, we knew we needed to adjust the attendance projections and prices. And we had very limited data. It was a lot of guesswork. There's been no event like COVID. You know, we had some history, but again, we were just guessing. So for in-person, we lowered our attendance expectations. For virtual, we lowered our attendance expectations, and we also reduced the price points for obvious reasons. You know, we were going to reduce some of our expenses, our direct cost. On the marketing side, though, we made sure we created 2 very unique marketing plans with distinct goals and strategies for in-person and virtual. So for in-person, it featured more of the traditional kind of marketing approaches, like focus on the greatness of the location and the fabulousness of the venue. And we were going to go to Opryland, and we were so excited. So we were going to focus on all of those things. Now, for the virtual side, as I described our audience, we included special strategies that were designed to kind of bring our people over to the dark tech side. And ease the fear of unknown. So just a lot more dynamic things, which we'll talk about later too. But for both in-person and virtual, we knew that we needed to emphasize the strength of our program content. Additionally, as an organization, we identified a critical decision pivot date, and we stuck to it. We wanted to make sure we had adequate time to market and make adjustments for either way, either a different looking in-person or a brand new virtual event. And most importantly, we consulted our major stakeholder groups to get support for both scenarios, in-person and virtual. We did not survey our members, and I know a lot of you guys have attended webinars about surveying members. We chose not to survey our members. Instead, we relied on input from some representative sources, specifically our board of directors. And then we have a wonderful member-based advisory council, and then our partners. And after, you know, we got all of their support, we just watched and we waited. And we monitored, obviously, like the local, state, and national regulations, but we paid attention to other industry events that we saw that had pivoted from in-person to virtual. And we cataloged lessons learned. I mean, as planners, like we literally were like, no, we would never do that. Oh yes, we definitely will do that. And we just kind of came up with our wish list. But most importantly, we monitored the performance of our own virtual events. We have a webinar series. We have online courses, and we had started to do some Zoom-based events and trainings. And honestly, they turned out to be the best indicators of our attendees' interest, their ability to pivot with us and participate, and then any potential fatigue that we might encounter. And it gave us great data in real time that we knew we could apply to our marketing approaches. And then, like, once we hit that decision date, we looked at all the information, and all signs pointed to virtual. And then we were able to just roll out and deploy the communications and marketing plan that we had developed for virtual.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Angelique, there was a follow-up question, and because you're a little further down in your registration process for the virtual event, have you done any checking, or have you determined whether or not you're getting more attendees or appealing to different audiences currently through the virtual versus the live that you weren't getting before?
Yes, I mean, definitely, knock on wood, registration is looking really strong, and we're playing up the fact that sort of the access again, when we look at the location of our attendees, we're able to say we're going to reach new audiences from people who might never have been able to take, 4 or 5 days away from, their office life and their personal life to come and be with us. So yeah, we also have a very robust online member community. And a lot of the questions that are coming up there, like for example, how long will we be able to access the content on, the training side? Like we're able to make adjustments to that. So, right now, it's really, if I had to say, I think we're going to see a slightly less youth attendance because our youth have to attend with adults. And so again, this is mirroring life, which is that a lot of our adult leaders are going to come and participate and not also have to watch their youth. So that's what we think is going to play out. But yes, right now, we're a little bit ahead of what we thought our virtual projections would be. So
Good. I would ask the same question of the SETS team, but I know you literally just made this decision, just changed. You haven't even really gotten Reg up and running quite yet. So we'll keep our eye on that and maybe report back in later. But could you at least, we got a question from the chat. Do you have a forecasted number in your mind for the live event, given the circumstances that we're in?
We followed a similar pattern to Angelique, which is we reduced and we're fairly risk adverse and we're very conservative in our predictions. We reduced the fees, we reduced the assumptions that we made about booth purchases. We wanted to make sure that people felt comfortable participating in whatever the way they did. And so we significantly lowered all of our numbers. I would say that based on those numbers, we're seeing pickup. And like Angelique, we've leveraged the data that we're getting from our webinars as early indicators, and those have been very popular. So we're excited to see the numbers come in. And we'll touch base in a month after things are rolling.
Yeah, I just want to note for SETS, they had their registration and housing open for months and months and months. That started way back in 2019. So we had a robust group of people already registered for the traditional live event. And given the circumstances and the fact that, or the reality that COVID wasn't going away, they made the decision to completely reformat and pivot and change. So we have, I say the we because I work with SETS a lot. We have this critical mass of people that were already registered, and now we're trying to transition them over to select from the menu of options that are now before them, given the retooling of the event overall. So just wanted to point that out. All right, well, we talked about the steps that Eric and Michael had put out there as good practices and what you did. Were there a couple in there that they mentioned that you didn't do, that you sort of, upon listening, wanted to maybe wish you did, or might even think about doing moving forward? I'll pitch that one to you first, Amy.
To me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Hindsight's 2020. I think we were thoughtful, maybe even thoughtful for a little longer than we probably should have been. If I was giving advice looking back, one of the things that we did was probably like a lot of you, sat in on 10,000 different software demos, and we kept waiting for the perfect software to make that pivot. And I'm not sure that there is a perfect solution out there. So my advice to you would be just choose one. You probably have some vendors that you like that fit within your budget, that fit within your technical expertise. There's no correct answer. I would just choose one. Like Angelique, we did not survey all of our membership. We really focused on key stakeholders and got some early buy-in, and they helped us define which of the different strategies we would pursue and which ones we weren't. We just felt like so far off, having actionable data come in from a survey probably wasn't practical. practical. And then I guess the one other thing that I would say is that these times, these COVID times, have really brought out great innovation and generosity, but it's also brought out some of the worst behavior and a lot of fear. And if you spend a lot of time addressing those fears, I don't know that you'll ever move forward. So for me, I had to compromise where we had to and just ignore other fears. I took some blows and tried to take them gracefully, and we just kept moving forward. I think that not knowing, you know, we have so much pacing data from the past, but you know, in the end, we're relying on a lot of gut. We think this will happen, and a lot of feedback from key stakeholders.
Thanks, Amy. I do want to just pitch something that we're doing at IMN. We are here to help any of our clients sort of navigate that virtual platform world because it's become very, very crowded. We've done a lot of work as an organization getting familiar with that and are very willing to help our clients streamline the process. We can even help support your virtual meeting logistical efforts and needs. So just wanted to say that because it is an overwhelming situation. And frankly, given that almost everyone's going virtual, this is a way we can stay engaged in helping our clients and supporting you in the places that you need it. Angelique, let me ask you, do you have anything that you kind of wish you did different?
Definitely echo everything that Amy said, but honestly, I would have become Michael and Eric's best friends. I mean, I would have, you know, it's tough, right? We just didn't have time. I didn't think
You still can.
Okay, I got you. But definitely would have consulted with an outside, you know, PR marketing firms, because this is truly a case of you don't know what you don't know. And there was a lot of information out there, but I will say that the more consulting advice you can get, the better. So definitely.
Well, certainly Eric and Michael are here in that regard to help steer and guide, and IMN can put you in touch with them if you need us to, but you obviously have met them now as well. So let's switch over. You've gone through your process, you've redesigned your meetings, and now it's time to really undergo your outreach efforts and implement your marketing and communication plans. Angelique, do you want to talk a little bit about what you did in relation to that?
Yeah, so at CACA, I'm really very fortunate because marketing, communications, and meetings are all under one team. So everything was really quite seamless. So once the decision was made, we rolled out our comms and marketing plan, and some key elements, we contacted our key stakeholders first and let them know. The communication came directly from our CEO. We did a special alert. We shared it across all of our social media and e-channels. And then we leaned all the way in to the virtual space. I mean, we didn't just tiptoe, we just splashed into the deep end, and we acted like this is what we were planning all along, which I think is important. And then, like I said earlier, we applied that data that we gleaned from monitoring our other events. And, you know, we pulled some catchphrases like, this is not another Zoom meeting, to address, you know, Zoom fatigue, for example. And then we acknowledged and embraced that this would be different. You know, I know for many groups, it's like, this is the future. You know, I don't really know if we're ready to say we're going to continue. So for us, we positioned this as a once in a lifetime, unique event. We started calling it an experience, you know, kind of fed up on that FOMO. We developed a distinct logo for it. So we changed it, and I'll just show you guys real quick. So instead of just calling it our mid-year, we really tagged it our virtual mid-year. So branded it separately and uniquely. And then we focused on what we called the virtual event value proposition, which is the strength of the training content and the flexibility of access. We reached out to our partners to make sure that not only they supported the event financially, but that they got their leadership to participate. And that resulted in actually more content. So we have the leaders of some of our major partners, you know, giving keynote speeches, etc. And then we just did more, like more frequent communications across all of our social channels. And we did do more targeted messages. Like, for example, to that question about new audiences, you know, some of our audience has specific grant funding. And we were just, you know, intentional about saying, hey, you can use your grant dollars for this. And you could bring more to come to this event because it's virtual. And then on the sort of feature side, we added just more dynamic elements to our e-marketing. So more videos, more graphics, music, interactive polls, like again, just to bridge that technical divide. We put together a justification toolkit. We did more cross promotion at our webinars, and we leveraged our trainers and our presenters to promote. But I think most notably, the new strategy we added was that we linked attendance to this virtual mid-year as a show of support to CADCA. And it really was, I think that's been, that's going to be pivotal in the end. It was not just about coming and training and learning, which we know all of our attendees are going to do, but it really was about, at this time, we need to come together in this way to support all of our work. So.
Beautiful. So some questions are coming up through the chat related to costs, and we'll go to that after we give Tim and Amy, or I think, Tim, why don't you talk a little bit about your marketing process and how you rolled out, and then we're going to switch over and talk a little bit about costs and finances. So Tim?
Sure, yeah, you know, I'd say our marketing rollout actually really kind of started with generating content for, you know, kind of lead generation. One thing we did even before we knew which direction we were headed for our fall event was kind of quickly put together a lot of webinar series for the summer. And that's something we didn't typically do. I mean, we would have a couple webinars here and there, but they were pretty few and far between. And so with that, we leveraged one of our partners who would put on those other ones, and then identified some new partners to really kind of crank that content out a little bit more frequently, just as a way to keep engaged with our audience, you know, throughout the summer, and not just kind of disappear for a while. Because one thing too is that we had a lot of smaller regional events that we were planning over the summer as well, and you know, of course, all those have either been canceled or kicked to the fall. So we didn't want to have this gap in the schedule for the summer, and so putting on a lot of webinars, in addition to another interview series that we put together as well. Where we would interview people for about 60 to 90 seconds in Zoom and then just push out the content. So basically generating content, you know, for the summer that we can just, you know, roll out on a consistent basis to get people engaged, get people registering, and get some new data into our system. So that's been a big help right off the bat. In addition though, you know, really the communications has really been twofold. I mean, there's the marketing of the actual event and the different registration options, but then there's the communication of how this event is going to, you know, actually operate, and how you, a participant, is going to be able to engage in this content, and what are the options that you have in front of you. So, I mean, there's changes to registration, obviously, and so we need to explain that to people. There's the on-site experience is changing as well, so we need to explain what that is and what are the key benefits of being on-site. Access to the virtual components is completely new, so that needs to be explained to people and to the right audience. And then also just how networking is going to work. I mean, that's something that will, you know, people have a lot of questions about that, and that's something that needs to be explained to our audience as well, whether it's from being on site or virtually as well. So explaining how all these different benefits are going to be there for them in the fall is a key part of the communication. But then also kind of tying in all our sub-brands. So we do have our umbrella brand of North America Smart Energy Week. And fortunately for us, like within that, we have about 6 different sub-brands, for instance, Solar Power International, Energy Storage International. So those sub-brands actually fit kind of nicely into the fact that we can segment them pretty well and continue our messages that we would have had towards those groups anyways had we had not changed format, but obviously the content within that's a little bit different. So that works nicely. I would say also some of the big messages is obviously how this whole event is going to be done safely, because that's a huge component of, you know, obviously moving outside keeping people apart. So, you know, that's pretty key in our messaging. Our Safely Connecting initiative is part of all this. So that's a pretty good message that we're including into our communications. And then lastly, with the audiences. So we do have, so we use Bear Analytics to gather a lot of information, and we've been using them for a couple of years. So we do have a good sense of where our audience is, what things they're interested in, their general demographics, but also one great thing about it now is, you know, we can sort of see like the drive-in radius, like how many people outside of Las Vegas are interested in coming to our events that could actually drive in, who may not want to obviously fly in, but are within like a 5-hour drive, which, you know, it's a long drive, but out west, that's kind of a short drive, I guess. So that, you know, that includes, you know, LA, you know, Salt Lake City, Phoenix. You got a radius there of people who might be willing to drive into Las Vegas, and we know who those people are. And so we can also give them a different message than we would somebody who might be flying in from, you know, New York or something like that. And another great thing too is that with the different types of, the different formats, so with the on-site registration, the on-site component, you know, there's a nominal fee to attend on-site, but the virtual expo part is free. You still have to register. But so people who might be sitting on the fence right now, they don't know what they're going to do in the fall, you know, they can still register for this free virtual component now, and then, you know, we can continue to follow up with them over the months as the picture of the health crisis sort of, you know, changes shape. You know, they might be more comfortable, let's say August or September, on making that switch to on-site, but we know that they're going to participate in one way or another. So we're at least able to potentially upsell them later down the road.
Great. Eric, I'd be interested, you've been listening in on the strategies between these two organizations. Do you have anything to comment or say about what they're doing and the thought processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two organizations, luckily, that are on the panel, you know, really have done a tremendous job, and I think are thinking about things in a great, you know, approach. I think what I'm seeing from hearing the discussion and seeing some of these questions, I think one of the big things, and not necessarily for every organization, but you can't compare your event from last year to what is now going to be a new thing. It's not an apples to apples. So when you're looking at pricing, when you're looking at attendees, it's not just, do we change our registration fee? It's, you have to reimagine your entire revenue model for that event in many ways. And that's scary for a lot of organizations. But what we've seen, and I think you're hearing it here, it's just maybe the nomenclature is a little bit different that we use, is we're seeing a lot of clients replacing their annual, you know, flagship event with a portfolio of new offerings. Whether those are branded with a logo that is the same or new or slightly different, there's a portfolio of new offerings, and each of those new offerings has a different cost structure to it and a different revenue model to it. And to the more, you know, so about paywalls, some people are going to be, you're going to have to put out some content for free. Then you're going to have premium content that you can charge more dollars for, you know, but I think more importantly, and this was a question that a few people addressed, is you also now have a whole opportunity to reach a new group of audiences that never have attended any of your events in the past. So your cost or your fees or your registration dollars might go down, but do you have an opportunity, instead of reaching 500 people, to all of a sudden have 1,000 people, right? And so I think what I'm hearing, and I think what the panelists are speaking to, is it's not an apples to apples comparison. In a lot of ways, you got to be really agile and reimagining. Like, I love how Angelique, how they had 2 different budgets, 2 different ways of approaching it, because that's the way you're going to need to kind of think about this for the next probably couple of years, in my opinion. And so I think thinking about it as a new portfolio is kind of where I would go.
Great. Michael, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I've heard that you've done some surveying and have some good data to present on different pricing for programming. Are you prepared to share some of that with us today?
Yeah,
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, pleasure. And it ties in nicely what Eric was just saying in terms of, I think what you said, new portfolio. I think it's a really great way of looking at this. I think it's confusing when we say virtual events to think of that as competitive to a physical event. And it's almost like thinking that going to the Super Bowl would be competed with by watching it on television. It's just not even remotely the same experience, right? Like watching it on TV is great, but there's no one that's like, nah, never mind. You know, I really love football, but I'd rather not go to the game. I'll just watch it on TV. And I think it's a great example of the opportunity that's facing events, right? Like that there's this portfolio, this new portfolio opportunity, that there's this new opportunity to engage that audience, engage that community, engage a larger audience, a much, much global audience, right? Like solar power has this amazing opportunity to talk to the whole world in a way that it probably never had before. We've worked with a group in Boston that does French education that is now, like, they're the one local Boston chapter that's now reaching the entire world. And I think it's really fascinating to see that change. And then, sorry, this does tie into pricing, I promise. That's where there is this opportunity now to address that audience separately than the physical and to see how valuable that is. And it really depends on the content. If your content is timely, relevant, and also expires, right? So you can't just go watch something that was made 10 years ago or 5 years ago and get the same value out of it, or it's exclusive, you can charge a considerable amount. We have data that says that something like 81 to 87% of people would pay half of what they would pay for the physical events for the virtual content. And we have data that also says that about 40% of people would pay as much or more because they don't have to travel for it. Which is fascinating, right? Because if you think about it, no matter what, the cost to engage your content has gone down. I don't have to fly, I don't have to drive on the virtual side. I don't have to get a hotel room, I don't have to get dinner. There's just a lot of cost. At the time, I can slip in and out of virtual, I can watch it later and whatnot. So, and then if you look at it, and really our analysis is that the content is largely the same value as it was before, if you can get it virtually. But what's lost is the opportunity to connect to the speakers and to network with other attendees. Those are the two major value adds people identify as, I wish I could still do that. So and getting to marketing and how to think about marketing this, I think it was Angelique talking about, this is critical to supporting, like thinking about what the value is and what your audience cares about, right? Support our industry. Solar power is in a similar boat where you can say, you're supporting the environment. You're like, climate change is a real problem. You need to stay engaged now more than ever. So yeah, I think there's a ton of opportunity there. And then if you can find ways of features, functionality that mitigate that loss of content value or that loss of networking opportunity and speaker engagement, that's either you can build that into your core product and charge more for it, or you can have a freemium product of receive the content and then charge more for the opportunity to engage speakers and engage other people. I think that's where what we're seeing is some really exciting.
That's absolutely right, Michael.
Experimentation. Thank you. Yeah, some really exciting experimentation around pricing models that you would have never had the opportunity to do before, where you're like, well, what is the real value here? Is it watching, or is it engaging people, or is it interacting with other people? Especially for sponsors too, right? Are they paying for meetings? Are they paying for the chance to have their brand out there? So I think when you think about pricing, you've got to say, you've really got to break it down like a science experiment and say, let me think about all the different things that people might value, and then think about ways I can run a test. Like send an email, like you don't have to change your pricing. You can send an email and see if people pay and then back off if they don't. And I think that that's something that, you know, in the startup space, you get used to, like, how do I test things? I think that's something that is critical for associations and organizers in this moment in time of, how do I just run a little experiment?
Interesting. Good stuff. I was thinking about rock concerts or any kind of concert where you pay a ticket to go, but then you pay extra to go backstage and meet with the band. And that's sort of the same concept I think you're putting out there with your speakers or your thought leaders is, sure, you can pay this cost to hear what they have to say, but maybe there's this premium level of interaction that people would be willing to pay more to ask their questions in a more intimate setting and get some quality time. So
Or how much would your sponsors pay to host the breakout session with one of your top speakers and an elite group of invitees? And how much would some additional invitees pay to join that small intimate breakout session?
Okie doke. So we had a lot more questions planned, and it's 10 till 3. So I wanted to sort of pivot here and talk a little bit about any kind of intentional steps you're taking as organizations to create unique and new communities. And is there something there that you're doing that you'd want to share out, Amy or Tim?
Yeah, so I mean, we're in the midst of sort of, I think Amy alluded to it earlier, but we're in the midst of planning and rolling out a platform that will keep our audience engaged year round. So it'll help bundle up all the content that we've already produced. So I think that in and of itself will create kind of a community that will be invested in the content that we produce and the ability to network with each other. So I think, I think, you know, so it will be worthwhile, obviously, well past our event in the fall and then in the years to come. So I think it's something that we have been kicking around internally, I think, for a while. And I guess one thing too is this whole crisis is kind of like, you know, made you kind of think about like all these other ideas you might have had in your back pocket that may not have been you know, good to try to flesh out when you're in the midst of trying to plan one event after another, after another, after another. You have a time, not necessarily to breathe per se, because you're just switching to a new format, but you still have an opportunity to kind of put out some new ideas that maybe you didn't really have the time to before other things were just getting in the way. So I think this is one of those ideas that I think will help keep our audience engaged with each other, with us year round, and provide a new community in the years going forward.
So I feel that we're doing the same sort of thing there, Tim, within IMN. There are lots of things as a company we've wanted to do, and just the absolute, I would say, devastation of COVID to our industry has allowed us and given and forced us, dare I say, to become more nimble, to become more fluid. It created a need to get creative and finally say, okay, we're doing this. And so we are branching out into different service areas and stepping out of our comfort zone a little bit too. So I think that whole experience, it's not just on the association level. I'm sure Eric and Michael, you're doing it too, trying to think about different ways to adjust to the new landscape. I wanted to talk a little bit about data. I know, Michael, you are very, very active in the sort of the social media space, and that both CADCA and SETS value analytics and data and using that for their planning. Angelique, do you want to share efforts on what kind of data you're tracking now that you're launching a new event to determine how you're doing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're tracking e-blast metrics for sure. We've literally doubled the number of emails, more than doubled under COVID. And we're fortunate that our open rates are still positive, our unsub rates are still low. And that's because, you know, everything we sent is relevant and important. We're monitoring our website analytics, like the page visits and the click-throughs, and then tracking all of our engagements and reach for our social media posts. But one comment I wanted to make too about this virtual event space, I think sometimes pre-COVID, virtual events were sort of bonus content. You know, they were like nice value adds. And I think for us, it's really like, how do we position these as their own standalone creatures? And, you know, for us, when we looked at the audience and our reach, that's where we came up with. I mean, we launched a brand new expression, Everyday Cat Trains, and at the beginning of this pandemic, and we've been able to demonstrate that. And that is every day, whether or not you're in person or you're, you know, in South America, you're able to reach and experience our training. So we didn't have to pit it against our in-person, but we also didn't want to just treat it as like, oh, this webinar enhances what you experience on site. It really is, no, this is something unique. And again, it just all worked beautifully with our rebranding, so.
Nice. Amy or Tim, any comments on the data and the analytics and the use of that in your planning?
Yeah, you know, it's always been a key component of what we've been doing. I think I had mentioned before, you know, we have a lot of data from Barry Analytics that has tracked everything from, you know, basic demographics again to drive-in radiuses to how many people have been consistently coming to our events over the years, and how they interact even with some of our regional events to see if they're like really, you know, super fans, so to speak. But you know now I think with that it gives us, you know, a bit of a leg up in terms of how we can approach our audience and how to best segment them. Again, knowing where these people are. Who might be more interested in participating in a live event if they can get to it easily, or even what type of content that they want. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, we'll look at people who have participated in our full conference-only sessions in the past years, and obviously they would be more apt to most likely want to engage in our virtual education conferences versus those who really just bought expo passes. So, you know, we can easily segment it that way, but knowing how many people that is in each one of those buckets can kind of, you know, give us an understanding of what we can kind of expect based on our current audiences, not to really say about new audiences that we'd like to bring in through our going off of our leads from our webinar series. In addition, I think I might have mentioned this before as well, just now that registration has launched for our events in the fall, you know, keeping an eye on who is registering for those virtual only components to our events, especially from the expo side, and seeing if there's opportunity there later down the line to kind of upgrade them to either a full education conference series or even the in-person paid pass as well.
Great. So, so that sounds great. For example, I just want to interject for IMN. I mean, obviously we're doing these webinar series to help educate and be resilient, and hope that by reaching, and we're looking at the people that we're reaching. Michael, I know that you help facilitate that for us. If we're bringing in new folks listening to our content, they might be future clients for us, and that creates opportunities for everyone. And I'm sure that Sets and Katka are doing the same. If you're getting a new person joining your virtual, hopefully they can be targeted as a new member down the line. So all great stuff. I think we're gonna have to wrap it up here. So I just wanted to say, everything we've talked about has been so rich with information. I want to give everyone a chance to sort of share a parting thought. Amy, I'm gonna go to you first and see, is there anything you want to share just overall before we go?
I would focus your future success on the things that you are already strong in. For example, gain consensus from your leadership. We were able to pivot fairly quickly within weeks, because once an idea resonated, we ran with it, and each of the departments worked together as a team, researched the necessary implications to the experience and the budget, and then we elevated it to leadership, and we'll continue to work together as a team to co-create these new experiences.
Tim?
Yeah, I'll just echo something that Eric mentioned earlier in terms of a portfolio, you know, just really, you know, kind of making sure you're diversified in sort of how you deliver your education and your B2B experience, whether that is a combination of live events, webinars, television, or who knows, you know, just making sure that there are multiple ways that people can receive the content that you have, and you know, keep it coming out too.
Sounds good. How about Angelique? You got something for us?
Yeah, I would just say I'll echo what my CEO told me at the beginning of this, which is we should not let great get in the way of being good. And I think as meeting planners, like we're our own worst enemies sometimes. And again, we know that if you're considering doing a virtual event, recognize and own that it's going to be different. But again, it's all a learning experience, and don't let any fear get in the way of trying something different.
How about you, Eric? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so this has actually come up recently for us, and I think is really important, and something we overlooked early on was providing the appropriate support and resources, technology and training to those delivering the content in a virtual environment. There are tons of speakers and content that does not translate the same way from a live breakout session or keynote to a virtual environment. And that's an area that I think a lot of the associations and nonprofits that we're talking to really needs to make sure that they're looking at making sure the integrity and the quality of their content is delivered in a virtual environment at equal or even greater value. And the last thing I'll note, and Michael already stole it earlier in his comments, which is this is the time where associations and nonprofits need to operate like a startup. You got to be ready to fail and fail fast and do it again. We've had a lot of conversations with board members where we're helping their executive team or management team articulate to the board that we might try 5 or 10 things and only 1 or 2 of those might work. And that's okay. As long as you plan for that and you expect that. So that's it for me. And thank you all again for inviting me to participate.
Great. Michael, anything to offer?
I'll be quick. I know we're wrapping up. I appreciate the time. Thank you, IMN. Thank you, everybody else. I really enjoyed it. My takeaway is that as much as we can't always get together in person right now, there's a ton of need to get together and share ideas still as humans and bring people together. So I appreciate IMN doing that. I appreciate everybody else that's putting effort into that. It's basic to human that we need to get together and share our best ideas and share our visions and create new visions for how we can do what we're doing better than we ever have. And it's easy to get lost thinking about what was missing, the devastation that's happened. But if you can change your focus and say, what's the new opportunity out there? There is so much need. There's so much human need out there that needs to be solved for, that everyone watching, everybody on this panel, everybody watching can help with, can fulfill, can drive value towards. That if we stay focused on that, we can find these new opportunities and create a lot of value for all of us.
Awesome. So I want to thank all of you here on the panel. You've been wonderful. It's been a pleasure working with you. I appreciate your willingness to come on and share your thoughts and all of your ideas. Eric and Michael, I think you'll be okay with this. We're gonna, to anyone on the chat and in our audience that might have some questions that they want to pose one-on-one, maybe just directly to any of the speakers and panelists here, we'll circulate some contact information for them, and we'll do that probably tomorrow or the next day, and encourage you to reach out and keep the conversations going. I know that someday we'll meet again in person live where we can shake hands and share stories and coffee and maybe even a hug if it's appropriate. And I hope you have a great week and a wonderful weekend ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Cheers.